The discovery the observation deck of orbital station Kepler-7 hummed with the usual sounds of deep space monitoring. Specialist Maria Santos sat at her console, running routine scans of the outer rim sectors. It was supposed to be another quiet night shift, the kind where nothing happens and coffee becomes your best friend. But then her screen flickered with something unusual, a signal. Old, weak, barely registering above the cosmic background noise. Maria leaned forward, her fingers dancing across the controls to isolate the frequency. The pattern was unmistakable. It was a distress beacon, and the encryption signature marked it as human. Her blood ran cold. The timestamp on the signal showed it had been broadcasting for 23 years. Maria's hand trembled as she reached for the communications panel. Within minutes, her supervisor arrived. Then the station commander. Then representatives from Earth's United Defense Command. The small monitoring room suddenly felt crowded with people all staring at the same impossible data. "Run it again," Commander James Park ordered. His voice tight with controlled emotion. Maria replayed the signal. Through the static and interference came a message, broken but clear enough to understand. "This is Transport Vessel Nomad. Critical damage. 17 survivors. Coordinates attached. Please, anyone. We're still here." The room went silent. Everyone present knew the name Nomad. 23 years ago, that civilian transport had vanished while carrying colonists to the Arcturus settlements. 347 people had been aboard. The ship had been declared lost with all hands after 6 months of fruitless searching, but the signal said 17 survivors. Present tense. Still here. Where's it coming from? Commander Park asked. The answer made everyone in the room exchange worried glances. The Forbidden Sector, a region of space so dangerous that every spacefaring species in the known galaxy had marked it as a no-go zone. Unstable stars, rogue planets, gravitational anomalies that appeared without warning. Nothing that entered the Forbidden Sector ever came out. "That's impossible," someone whispered. "Nothing could survive there for 23 years. Commander Park pulled out his communication device. His next words would change everything. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Tell them we found the Nomad." The Council's response news of the signal reached the Galactic Council within hours. The Council chamber on Station Unity Prime filled with representatives from dozens of species. The human ambassador, Marcus Chun, stood before them requesting immediate assistance for a rescue operation. The response was not what he hoped for. Chancellor Voreen of the Zakari Confederation spoke first, his 3 eyes blinking in what humans had learned to recognize as disapproval. "Ambassador Chun, we understand your emotional response to this discovery. However, the Forbidden Sector is called Forbiddens for valid reasons. 47 expeditions from various species have entered that region in the last century. None returned. We're not asking anyone else to risk their ships," Marcus replied, keeping his voice level. "We're requesting that our rescue fleet be granted passage through Council-controlled space to reach the sector more quickly." Councilor Thera, representing the Orinth Unity, made a gesture of sympathy with her upper appendages. "Ambassador, please understand our position. The signal is 23 years old. The probability of survivors at this point is statistically negligible. Your resources would be better spent on living colonies that need support." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "The message says they're still alive. 17 people are waiting for rescue." "The message is automated," Chancellor Voren countered. "It continues broadcasting regardless of whether anyone remains alive to maintain it. This is a ghost signal, Ambassador. Chasing it would be suicide for your fleet." Around the chamber, other representatives nodded in agreement. The Helian scholars, the Zentari merchants, the Qualith military observers, all agreed that attempting a rescue was illogical, dangerous, and ultimately futile. Marcus looked at each of them, these logical, practical species who had calculated the acceptable losses and moved on. Then he straightened his shoulders and spoke with absolute clarity. "Then we'll go alone. Humanity thanks the Council for their time." He walked out of the chamber before they could respond. Behind him, he heard the murmur of confused alien voices trying to understand why humans would risk so much for such impossible odds. Marcus already knew they wouldn't understand. They couldn't, because they had never been human. The mobilization. The message went out across all human colonies simultaneously. It was simple, direct, and devastating. The Nomad has been found. Survivors confirmed. All available vessels report for rescue operations. What happened next shocked every alien observer in human space. Within 6 hours, ships began gathering at the Sol System rally point. Not just military vessels, though every destroyer, frigate, and carrier in range responded immediately. Civilian ships came too. Cargo haulers dumped their loads at the nearest station and burned hard for Earth. Mining vessels abandoned their asteroid claims. Private yachts, colony transports, even old pre-FTL ships that had been converted into orbital museums were pulled out of retirement and made spaceworthy again, if it could fly and hold atmosphere. It was being prepared to launch. Ambassador Terrao of the Zentari Collective watched the mobilization from the observation deck of Geneva Station. His species had been part of the galactic community for 4,000 years. They had seen wars, migrations, disasters, and triumphs. But he had never seen anything like this. They're stripping their defenses completely, his aide observed with alarm. Every system is being left with minimal protection. This is madness. Terrell didn't respond. He was too busy counting ships. 1,200 vessels now. 1,500. 2,000. The number kept climbing as more ships arrived from distant colonies, pushing their engines to dangerous limits to make the rendezvous. A human officer approached Terrell, a young woman with the rank insignia of Earth's defense fleet. "Ambassador Terrell, your government requested an observer accompany the rescue fleet. Will you be joining us?" "I will," Terrell replied. He needed to see this, needed to understand what drove these humans to such extremes. The officer nodded and handed him a datapad. "Fleet departure is in 4 hours. These are the coordinates for your assigned position in the formation." Terrell glanced at the pad, then back at the gathering armada. "May I ask a question, Lieutenant?" "Of course, Ambassador. How many of these ships contain crew members who have family on the Nomad?" The lieutenant checked her own datapad. 37 ships, Ambassador, out of 2,143 vessels total. Terrell felt something cold settle in his chest. So the rest of these people, they're risking their lives for strangers? "They're risking their lives for humans," the lieutenant corrected gently. "That's all that matters. We don't leave our people behind, ever." She walked away, leaving Terrell to contemplate her words. Around him, more ships continued to arrive. The largest rescue fleet in recorded galactic history, assembling in less than a day for 17 people who might already be dead. The Zentari ambassador made a decision. He would recommend a complete reassessment of humanity's threat level, not because they were aggressive or expansionist, but because they were unpredictable. A species that would risk everything for impossible odds was a species that could never be fully calculated or controlled, that made them either the most dangerous allies or the most valuable friends. Terrell wasn't sure which yet. The address Admiral Sarah Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, looking out at the assembled fleet through the view screen. 2,143 ships. The largest human armada ever gathered, and they were about to fly straight into hell. She activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Her face appeared on screens across every vessel, from massive carriers to small rescue shuttles. Every single person in the fleet stopped what they were doing to listen. 23 years ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying the weight of command and compassion in equal measure. A ship called Nomad vanished. 347 of our people disappeared without a trace. We searched. We hoped. We grieved. Eventually, the galaxy told us to move on. Told us they were gone. Asterisk, she paused, letting her words sink in. Today, we received a message. 17 survivors. Still alive. Still waiting. Still hoping someone would come. Across the fleet, people stood straighter. Some cried. Others clenched their fists. All of them felt the same thing burning in their chests. The Forbidden Sector is the deadliest region in known space, Sarah continued. Every species in the galaxy avoids it. We'll be flying into gravitational storms, radiation fields, and spatial anomalies that can tear a ship apart. Many of us might not come back. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes hard with determination. But 17 people have survived the impossible for 23 years. They held on because they believed we would come. They had faith in humanity. So we're going to prove that faith was justified. Sarah's voice rose, filling every bridge and cargo hold and crew quarters across the massive fleet. We're going to fly into that sector. We're going to find our people. And we're going to bring them home. Not some of them. Not most of them. All of them. That's not a hope or a wish. That's a promise. The fleet erupted in acknowledgement. 2,000 voices saying yes across every communication channel. Yes, we understand the risk. Yes, we're ready. Yes, we're going. Ambassador Terrell watched from his observership, recording everything. His government would need detailed documentation of what happened here. Would need to understand how a species could mobilize this quickly, this completely, for such a small number of people. The Centauri officer assigned to brief him spoke with barely concealed confusion. Ambassador, their own analysts give them a 30% chance of finding survivors. 45% chance of significant fleet casualties. These odds are terrible. By our standards, yes, Terrell agreed. But he was beginning to suspect that humans calculated odds very differently than his people did. All ships, prepare for jump, Admiral Rodriguez commanded. Navigation coordinates locked. Destination, Forbidden Sector, Outer Rim. We jump in 3 minutes. Terrell strapped into his observation seat and activated all recording equipment. Whatever happened next, the galaxy needed to see it. Needed to know what humans were capable of when their people needed them. The 3 minutes passed in focused silence. Engineers made final checks. Medical teams prepared for casualties. Pilots ran through emergency protocols. Every person in the fleet knew they might die. They went anyway. All ships report ready, the tactical officer announced. Admiral Rodriguez took a deep breath. Then let's go bring our people home. All ships, jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, jump. 2,143 human ships vanished from soul space in synchronized flashes of light. They were going to the place where ships go to die, and they were doing it without hesitation. Behind them, Ambassador Terrell's observer ship followed at a cautious distance. He had a feeling he was about to witness something that would change how every species in the galaxy viewed humanity. He was right. Asterisk. Entering the storm, the Forbidden Sector looked like space had gone wrong. Instead of the peaceful darkness dotted with stars, the human fleet emerged into a nightmare of twisted physics and angry energy. Massive clouds of ionized gas glowed with sickly purple and green light. Lightning storms arced between stellar debris, each bolt carrying enough power to vaporize a small moon. Gravitational wells appeared and vanished randomly, creating ripples in space itself that the sensors could barely track. Admiral Rodriguez studied the navigation display with her senior officers. Chief Navigator Tom Williams had plotted 8 possible routes to the Nomad's last known coordinates. Every single one had a casualty projection above 40%. The shortest route takes us through the Maelstrom Zone, Tom explained, highlighting a region where 3 gravitational anomalies orbited each other in an unstable pattern. Fastest, but also most dangerous. Ships could be crushed or torn apart. Time difference between shortest and safest routes? Rodriguez asked. 36 hours, Admiral. 36 hours. That was 36 more hours those survivors would spend in hell. 36 hours where their life support could fail, where someone could die from injuries or illness, where hope could finally break after 23 years of holding on. Rodriguez made her decision. We take the fast route. Those people have waited long enough. Tom nodded without argument. He understood the math. Speed meant danger to the fleet, but delay meant danger to the survivors. When those were the options, humans always chose to risk themselves rather than risk the people they came to save. The fleet adjusted course and pushed deeper into the forbidden sector. Ambassador Terrell watched from his observer ship, positioned safely at the edge of the fleet formation. His recording equipment captured everything as the first gravitational wave hit the human armada. Space itself seemed to flex and twist. The wave was invisible but devastating. Ships on the edge of the formation suddenly found themselves being pulled sideways by forces that shouldn't exist. Shields flared as hulls strained against impossible pressure. Multiple ships reporting structural stress, the tactical officer announced, her voice professionally calm despite the crisis. The destroyer Relentless has lost main power. Medical frigate Compassion reports hull breaches on decks 4 and 5. Rodriguez's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. Get rescue teams to Compassion immediately. Have Relentless fall back to the safe zone for repairs. All other ships maintain formation and continue forward. Another gravitational wave rolled through the fleet. This one was stronger. Terrell watched in horror as a cargo hauler called Perseverance began to buckle under the pressure. The ship's frame twisted, metal screaming in protest. Then the hull ruptured, atmosphere venting into space in a violent explosion of frozen air and debris. Perseverance is down, the tactical officer reported. Emergency beacons active. Life pods launching. Dispatch recovery teams, Rodriguez ordered. I want every single person off that ship. Terrell leaned forward in his observation seat, watching the human response. Instead of abandoning the crippled vessel and pushing forward, 6 ships broke formation to execute rescue operations. They moved with practiced precision, their pilots navigating through gravitational chaos to reach the life pods. They're stopping, Terrell's aide said with disbelief. In the middle of this death zone, they're stopping to save their own. Of course they are, Terrell replied quietly. He was beginning to understand something fundamental about humans. They had said they don't leave people behind. They meant it literally. Even here, even now, with 17 survivors waiting ahead, they would not abandon their own people to die. The rescue took 40 precious minutes. 40 minutes where the fleet held position in one of the most dangerous regions of space. 40 minutes where additional gravitational waves battered the ships. But when the rescue teams returned, they brought every single crew member from Perseverance with them. Rodriguez checked the casualty reports. 12 injured, none dead. Acceptable losses given the circumstances, though she hated thinking of her people as losses at all. All personnel recovered, her tactical officer confirmed. Fleet ready to continue. Then let's keep moving, Rodriguez said. We've got people waiting for us. The Armada pushed deeper into the maelstrom. The radiation field 6 hours into the journey, the fleet encountered the second major obstacle. A radiation storm that stretched across 300,000 kilometers of space. It pulsed with deadly energy, the kind that could fry electronics and cook crews inside their ships, despite shielding Dr. Lisa Park. The fleet's chief science officer studied the readings with growing concern. "Admiral, if we go through this, we'll lose ships. The radiation levels are beyond what most of our vessels can handle. Can we go around?" Rodriguez asked. "Yes, but it adds 19 hours to our journey time." 19 hours. Rodriguez closed her eyes and saw 17 faces she'd never met. 17 people who had survived impossible odds, who had held on to hope for 23 years. 19 hours might be the difference between finding them alive or finding their bodies. "We go through," she decided. "All ships, maximum shielding. Engineering teams on standby for radiation damage control. Medical teams prepare for exposure cases." The fleet entered the radiation storm like ships sailing into fire. The energy was so intense, it lit up their shields, creating a ghostly glow around each vessel. Inside the ships, crews worked frantically to keep systems operational as radiation penetrated even the best shielding. On the destroyer Valiant, Chief Engineer Marcus Reed watched his power readings fluctuate wildly. The radiation was interfering with everything, from navigation to life support. His team worked around the clock, manually rerouting power, replacing burned-out components, and jury-rigging solutions to problems that shouldn't have been solvable. "Port shield generator is failing," one of his engineers shouted over the alarm klaxons. "If it goes down, we'll take lethal doses of radiation." Marcus grabbed a radiation suit and a toolbox. "Then I guess we better make sure it doesn't go down." "Come on." They worked in the shield generator room while radiation alarms screamed warnings. The temperature was unbearable. The air tasted like copper and ozone. But they kept working because giving up meant death, and humans are very, very stubborn about not dying. They saved the shield generator with 3 minutes to spare. Asterisk. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Engineers performing miracles with broken equipment. Medical teams treating radiation sickness while suffering from it themselves. Pilots flying blind when their instruments failed, trusting instinct and training to keep their ships on course. Ambassador Terrell watched it all and felt something he had rarely experienced in his long life. Genuine awe. These humans were suffering, dying, pushing themselves beyond reasonable limits. And they weren't doing it for glory or conquest or resources. They were doing it for 17 people they had never met. Why? His aide asked, voicing the question that every alien observer was thinking. Why go through this for so few? Terrell thought about it for a long moment before answering. Because to them, it's not 17 strangers. It's 17 humans. And apparently, that makes all the difference. The fleet emerged from the radiation storm 12 hours after entering. Rodriguez reviewed the casualty reports with a heavy heart. 3 ships lost. 47 crew members dead. 218 injured, many with radiation exposure that would affect them for the rest of their lives. She added their names to the mental list. She was keeping 47 people who had given their lives bringing their people home. She would remember every single one. Their families would be notified. Their sacrifices would be honored. But right now, she had a mission to complete. All remaining ships report status, Rodriguez ordered. The responses came back quickly. Damaged, but functional. Tired, but determined. Hurting, but not broken. 2,000 ships had become 1,973, but those that remained were absolutely committed to finishing what they started. Distance to Nomad's coordinates? Rodriguez asked. 6 hours at current speed. Navigation reported .6 more hours. After 23 years, the survivors were just 6 hours away from rescue. Rodriguez felt something catch in her throat. They were going to make it. They were actually going to pull this off. The Discovery. Nomad appeared on long-range sensors 90 minutes ahead of schedule. The ship had crashed on a rogue planet, a frozen world that drifted through space without a star to warm it. The planet itself shouldn't have been habitable. Surface temperature was minus 200 degrees. No atmosphere worth mentioning. Radiation levels that should have killed anything living within days. Yet the scanners showed something impossible. Heat signatures, power readings, and 17 distinct human life signs. They're alive, the tactical officer said, her voice filled with wonder. After 23 years in that hell, they're actually alive. Rodriguez felt tears on her face and didn't bother wiping them away. All ships, prepare for planetary approach. Launch all rescue shuttles. Medical teams, get ready. We're going down to get them. The fleet moved into orbit around the rogue planet. 50 rescue shuttles launched simultaneously, each carrying medical personnel, supplies, and crew members desperate to bring their people home. Rodriguez led the first wave personally. She needed to see this with her own eyes. The descent was brutal. The planet's gravity was heavy, pulling at the shuttles with greedy force. Atmospheric turbulence that shouldn't exist on a world with no atmosphere somehow battered them anyway. But the pilots were the best humanity had, and they brought their shuttles down safely through conditions that should have been impossible to survive. Nomad lay broken across a frozen plain. The ship had been beautiful once, a sleek civilian transport designed for comfort and efficiency. Now it looked like a corpse, hull plates torn away, one tire section just gone. But lights glowed in the windows. Smoke rose from makeshift exhaust vents. Someone had kept this wreck alive for 23 years, through sheer determination and stubborn human ingenuity. Rodriguez's shuttle landed 50 meters from the main airlock. She was the first one out, her boots crunching on frozen ground that had never seen a sunrise. Her team followed, carrying medical equipment and emergency supplies. They reached the airlock and found it sealed, which was good. Meant there was still atmosphere inside. One of her engineers worked the manual override while others set up a pressure tunnel. Got it, the engineer announced. The airlock groaned open. Air hissed out as pressure equalized. Rodriguez stepped through into the Nomad. The interior was a miracle of survival engineering. Every surface had been modified, repurposed, and rebuilt. Pipes and wiring ran everywhere, connecting salvage systems in ways that defied conventional engineering, but somehow worked. The walls were covered in patches, some metal, some clearly made from other materials. Everything looked like it had been taken apart and rebuilt 100 times, and it was warm. Impossibly, incredibly warm. "Hello," Rodriguez called out. "This is Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress signal. We're here to take you home." For a moment, nothing. Then footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. A woman emerged from the shadows. She was maybe 50, though she looked 70. Thin from years of rationing. Scars on her face and hands. Her clothes were patched and repatched, held together by determination and hope. But her eyes were clear, alert, and filled with an emotion Rodriguez couldn't quite name. "Earth Fleet?" the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're real? You actually came?" "We came," Rodriguez confirmed. "All 2,000 ships of us. We're here to bring all of you home." The woman's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees and started crying. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from 23 years of holding on. Hoping, believing that someone would hear their signal and care enough to come. Rodriguez knelt beside her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You made it. You survived. The waiting is over now." The woman looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I'm Captain Elena Reeves. I was the pilot. When we crashed, I became the leader. We lost so many, but 17 of us made it. We told ourselves every day that someone would come. We never stopped believing. You are right to believe, Rodriguez said softly. Now let's get you and your people home. Elena stood up shakily and led them deeper into the ship. They passed through corridors that had been converted into living spaces. A hydroponic garden growing food under salvaged lights. A workshop filled with tools made from scrap metal. A medical bay assembled from spare parts and desperate innovation. And everywhere, memorial walls. Names carved into metal plates. Hundreds of them. We lost 330 people, Elena explained quietly. Some died in the crash. Others from injuries, sickness, accidents over the years. We carved every name. Made sure to remember them. They kept us alive through their sacrifices. Rodriguez read the names as they walked. Each one was a person, a life, someone who had died hoping rescue would come for the survivors. They reached the main habitat, a large room that had once been a cargo bay. And there they were, 17 humans, young and old, healthy and sick, all staring at Rodriguez and her rescue team like they were witnessing a miracle. Everyone, Elena announced, her voice carrying across the room. This is Admiral Rodriguez. She's from Earth Fleet. They came for us. They actually came. The room erupted. Some people cried. Others laughed. A few just collapsed from relief. Children who had been born on this frozen world ran to the rescue team, touching their uniforms to make sure they were real. An elderly man approached Rodriguez with tears streaming down his face. Is Earth still there? Is it still beautiful? Earth is still there, Rodriguez assured him. And you're going to see it again very soon. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, tugged on Rodriguez's sleeve. My mom says Earth has oceans. Real water that goes on forever. Is that true? Rodriguez knelt down to the girl's level. It's absolutely true. And I promise you, you're going to stand on a beach and see the ocean with your own eyes. The evacuation began immediately. Medical teams assessed each survivor, while engineers evaluated what could be salvaged from the Nomad. The survivors were malnourished, showing signs of long-term radiation exposure, and carrying injuries that should have been treated decades ago. But they were alive. Dr. Park worked with her medical team, treating conditions she had only read about in history books. Malnutrition, radiation sickness, injuries that had healed wrong because there were no proper medical facilities. Psychological trauma from 2 decades of isolation. How did you survive? She asked Elena while checking her vital signs. The calculations say you should have run out of resources in the first year. 23 years should have been impossible. Elena smiled weakly. We tapped into the planet's geothermal core for power. Grew food in hydroponics using recycled waste. Made tools from wreckage. Fixed systems that couldn't be fixed. Rationed everything down to the last gram. And we never, ever gave up. She looked directly at Dr. Park. We survived because we're human. Because we're too stubborn to die when people are depending on us. And because we believed, every single day, that someone would hear our signal and come for us. Dr. Park recorded her words. Humanity needed to remember this story. Needed to know what their people were capable of when survival became the only option. Asterisk. The evacuation took 14 hours. Every survivor was carefully transported to the waiting fleet. The children went first, wrapped in thermal blankets and carried by rescue personnel, who treated them like the most precious cargo in the universe. Medical teams worked constantly, stabilizing the injured, treating the sick, providing comfort to people who had almost forgotten what safety felt like. Captain Elena Reeves was the last to leave the Nomad. She stood at the airlock, looking back at the ship that had been her prison and her home for 23 years. Should we destroy it? One of Rodriguez's officers asked. Eliminate the evidence of where we've been? No, Elena said firmly. This ship saved our lives. It deserves better than destruction. Rodriguez nodded. We'll leave it as a monument, a reminder that humans survived the impossible. As the final shuttle lifted off from the frozen planet, Ambassador Terrell watched from orbit. His recording equipment had captured everything. The desperate survival, the impossible engineering, the 17 people who had refused to die, and the 2,000 ships that had risked everything to save them. Do you understand now? His aide asked quietly. Why they did this? Terrell thought about everything he had witnessed. The casualties, the sacrifice, the sheer determination to save 17 people from a fate the rest of the galaxy had written off as inevitable. Yes, he said slowly. I understand. They did it because they're human. And apparently, being human means never accepting that someone is beyond saving. He would file his report with his Centauri collective, would recommend a complete reassessment of humanity's place in the galactic community. Not because they were dangerous, though they certainly could be, but because they were reliable in a way no other species had ever demonstrated. If humans were your friends, they would fly into hell itself to save you. If humans were your enemies, they would pursue you to the end of the universe. Either way, they were a species that never quit, never gave up, and never left their people behind. The galaxy needed to know that, needed to understand what these Deathworlders from their impossible planet were truly capable of. The human fleet regrouped in orbit, now carrying 17 survivors who had waited 23 years to go home. The journey back would be long and dangerous, but nobody doubted they would make it. These were humans, after all, and humans had just proven they could survive anything. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the stars. 47 crew members had died on this mission. 3 ships lost. Hundreds injured. Some would say the cost was too high for saving 17 people. Rodriguez disagreed. Every single life mattered. Every single person deserved the chance to go home. That was what it meant to be human. That was what separated them from species that calculated acceptable losses. All ships, Rodriguez announced to the fleet, set course for Earth. Let's bring our people home. 2,000 ships turned as one and began the long journey back to human space. Behind them, the Forbidden Sector continued its eternal storm. But for the first time in its history, it had failed to keep what it captured, because nothing, not distance or danger or impossible odds, could stop humans when their people needed them. That was the lesson the galaxy learned that day, and the galaxy would not forget it. Asterisk.